My sister demands I postpone my wedding for her divorce recovery. Parents skip my big day and toss out my belongings. My whole family is upset with me. My name is Lexi, and I am 27 Fahrenheit. Please listen to my story before passing judgment on me. Rose, my 32-year-old sister, was divorced a few months ago. I've been making an effort to support her during this difficult time. However, Rose and I have never been close, if I'm being completely honest. Her vast sisterhood was lacking. For years, she and her small circle of friends tormented me, and my parents did nothing to stop it. In my family, I always felt alienated. Let's fast forward to Rose's divorce a few months ago. She's been a complete mess. She had to return to live with our parents since she was unemployed. It didn't matter to me because I don't see my parents or Rose very frequently and we are not close. The problem is that I always felt like the odd one out, even as a child. The golden child was Rose. My parents loved her, and she did everything perfectly, straight A's, prom queen moments. In the meantime, I was the challenging, disobedient one. I got into fights, disobeyed curfews, colored my hair in outrageous hues, and more. The way Rose used to make me feel, however, was the worst. Not only would she harass me, but it seemed like she made a conscious effort to keep me out of her plans with her friends in front of me. She made sure I knew I wasn't wanted at school by spreading untruths about me. Then there was the response, or lack thereof, from my folks. They always stood behind Rose, no matter what she did. It stung a lot, and I carried that bitterness into adulthood. I recall telling them once about the things she said to me, and they dismissed it with the comment, "Oh, that's just how sisters are." However, my 29-year-old partner Joshua proposed to me approximately a month following my sister's divorce. It was among the most joyful times of my life. After all, I had been anticipating this for some time. After nearly 4 years of dating, Joshua and I had discussed marriage frequently. Therefore, it seemed as though everything was coming together when he eventually proposed. Even though my parents and I weren't particularly close, I notified them right away, of course. Perhaps, just possibly, this could be something that would unite us, I thought. Almost immediately, I went into wedding planning mode, thinking about venues, clothes, flowers, and all the other details. Sharing this time with my friends and the few members of my family that I truly get along with made me very happy. However, a few weeks later, my mother called. She told me they needed to talk to me about something significant, and she sounded serious. To be honest, my initial assumption was that it might have something to do with Rose and her entire mess after the divorce. I simply got a feeling that something bad was going to happen. So, kind of expecting the worst, I headed to their place the following evening. And sure enough, my mom revealed it as soon as I sat down. They wanted me to delay my wedding by 2 years, she informed me. Yes, 2 years, as Rose had recently gone through a divorce. What I was hearing was unbelievable. My sister's divorce caused my wedding to be postponed. I thought she must be kidding because it was so ridiculous that I briefly burst out laughing. She was dead serious though. She clarified that Rose needed time to heal and possibly find another partner because she was still devastated. It seems like my wedding would get in the way of it. I questioned my mother if she was serious as I sat there in shock. How could she possibly believe that Rose's romantic life was connected to my wedding? Rose's poor choices were intended to cause my wedding, one of the most important days of my life, to be postponed. "We are family, and we need to support each other," was the famous line my mother used to strike me. She has said this to me countless times. Always, it's about standing by Rose. They seem to want me to be this quiet, helpful person in the background who always prioritizes her needs. I was unable to control my anger. I told my mother that I couldn't believe she had the audacity to ask me such a question and that this was really absurd. Then I simply walked away. I didn't want to be there and hear more of their guilt-tripping and justifications. However, it didn't end there. Over the course of the following few days, my mother called me often to reassure me that this was the appropriate course of action and that the family as a whole, not just Rose, was at stake. She insisted on bringing up the unfairness of Rose attending my wedding while still going through her divorce. However, when was life ever fair? Just because one individual is experiencing something doesn't mean that things stop. It's not as if I'm attempting to make Rose feel unhappy. All I want is to marry Joshua and begin a life together. My dad also became involved, which surprised me because he often stays out of this kind of drama. Using Rose's current emotional state, and the fact that my wedding would be too much for her to take, he attempted to reason with me. He gave the impression that she would be severely burdened by my wedding, as though my joy would somehow make her even more unhappy. Again, though, I fail to see how it is my issue. I can't stop my life, especially to save her feelings, and I can't control how she feels. My parents continued to phone and harass me for days after that. I knew there would be more of the same guilt trip over delaying the wedding every time I saw their name appear on my phone. I must admit that I was growing impatient with them. In contrast, my sister had not spoken to me at all. I was starting to question whether this was truly what Rose desired or whether my parents were simply projecting their own problems onto me because it was all coming from them. I therefore made the decision to take matters into my own hands and give Rose a call directly after a week or so of this back and forth. At first, I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I was really calm. I questioned her directly if my parents were overreacting or if she was the one who set them up for this. At that point, she verified it. Yes, she did believe that delaying the wedding would be preferable. What was she thinking? She claimed that all of the relatives would question her about the divorce during the wedding and that she wasn't prepared for that kind of scrutiny. I was taken aback. We were discussing the wedding, which was one of the most important days of my life, even though I know divorce is a significant matter. Why should her concerns about what others might think of her take precedence over my wedding? I politely explained to her that this was my wedding and that I didn't think anyone would be bothering her about something so private at a gathering that was meant to be about Joshua and me. Let's face it, people are too preoccupied with the wedding of the couple, the cuisine, the dancing, and their personal life to pay any attention to anything else at the event. At my wedding, of all places, who is going to approach Rose and intrusively inquire about her failed marriage? Naturally, though, she refused to listen. She insisted repeatedly that she wasn't emotionally ready to deal with everyone and that if I truly cared about her, I would think about holding off until she was more resilient and able to take the attention. I became more irate the more she said. At last, I simply explained everything to her. I informed her that whether she or our parents attended or not, the wedding would take place regardless of her feelings. She was insecure about people asking her awkward questions, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from living my life. I didn't have to cope with that. She did. I immediately contacted my folks and told them the same thing once I hung up. Look, I love you all, but I'm not delaying the wedding, I remarked. It would be wonderful if you could lend me your support. If not, I can understand, but whether you are present or not, the wedding is taking place. As expected, my mother broke down in tears and said that Rose needed time to recover and that I was destroying the family. However, I had already made up my mind by then. I had no intention of giving up. 3 weeks ago, the wedding did take place. Joshua and I got married, and it was lovely. I won't lie, it was difficult to walk down the aisle by myself, even though my parents weren't there. I had dreamed about that moment all my life, and I always saw my father being there. As I approached Joshua, I could see that broad smile light up his face. I realized that I was just doing this for Joshua and myself, not for my parents, Rose, or anybody else. And to be honest, that was sufficient. I was content with my choice. My closest friends and those who genuinely support us were all around me. After the ceremony, things became a little more tricky when we arrived at the reception. The majority of my relatives, including some aunts, uncles, and cousins who had not been involved in the drama, had arrived. However, they took note. They were definitely curious when they saw that my parents weren't present. "Where are your mom and dad? Is everything okay?" People began to inquire. I was aware that I would eventually have to explain the entire complex situation. I initially made an effort to sidestep the inquiries so as not to turn the day into a family drama, but the questions kept pouring. I eventually sat down with some of my aunts and cousins and told them everything, including how my parents had insisted that I postpone the wedding, how they wanted me to put Rose's needs before of my own, and how they ultimately decided not to attend when I refused to comply. I didn't mince words. I had had enough of acting as though nothing was wrong. They responded with a mixture of amazement and incredulity. Some of them were upset on my behalf, while others were appalled that my parents would even ask such a foolish question. Being able to finally tell my side of the story felt like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. To be honest, it was nice to have some of my family members comprehend the difficulties I had been facing. More individuals heard the story as the evening wore on, and by the conclusion of the evening, it was essentially well known. Something unexpected happened instead of the criticism I had anticipated. The other members of the family began to shun my parents. It seemed as though the entire situation had made people realize how they had been treating me for years, prioritizing Rose and expecting me to always take a back seat to her. People started contacting me to offer their support, saying things like, "You did the right thing by standing your ground," and "I had no idea it was this bad." Then, something even more bizarre occurred. Our cousin, who is getting married next month, sent out an invitation to her wedding without inviting my parents. It seems that on her own special day, she didn't want that kind of hatred. That was completely unexpected, and I feel a little bad about it. However, I can't help but feel validated at the same time. I felt alienated for years, as though I was the one who was constantly making trouble or not being sympathetic enough. However, people were finally beginning to realize that perhaps, just possibly, it wasn't entirely my fault. Joshua and I took a week-long honeymoon after my wedding, and it was, quite honestly, the nicest getaway I could have ever imagined. Away from all the family drama, we traveled alone to this lovely beach resort. For the most part, I just enjoyed the silence without checking my phone. I was aware that my parents and most likely my sister would send me messages, but I was unable to handle them while on the honeymoon. It was time for us to unwind and begin this new chapter stress-free. Reality struck me hard once we returned. I made the decision to listen to the voicemails that had accumulated for a while. To be honest, I wasn't expecting what I heard. Rather than attempting to resolve the issue or simply have a polite chat, my parents' communications were rife with profanity. Among other colorful names, my mother dubbed me an entitled brat. My father spoke in a similar tone, even going so far as to say that I was destroying the family. It was really nasty, not just angry. The allegations of selfishness, the guilt trips, and the passive-aggressive comments were all too much. I initially chose to ignore the messages in the hopes that they would stop after a few days, but that didn't work out. Actually, the situation just got worse. They increased the frequency of their calls and left voicemails full of the same poison nonsense. They started contacting me via Facebook, Instagram, and email after I banned their numbers. They didn't let up. After being silent since the wedding, my sister suddenly spoke up and sent me lengthy letters accusing me of ruining the family by prioritizing Joshua and my happiness over maintaining the family's togetherness. To be honest, it was rather draining. They even began using several phone numbers at one point in order to avoid being blacklisted. After I blocked one number, they would return with another in a few hours. I had the impression that I was playing a perverse game of whack-a-mole, except that toxic family members who couldn't accept no were the moles. To be honest, I became quite irritated. When your own relatives simply won't leave you alone, what do? They would always find a way to drag me back into the drama if I attempted to stand back and concentrate on my personal life. They seemed unable to accept that I was content without them and that I no longer required their continual affirmation or approval. I discussed it with Joshua, and he has been really encouraging. He made suggestions ranging from deleting all communication to altering my phone number. However, a part of me is really torn. They're still my parents. Despite everything they've said and done, I still feel horrible for shutting them out, which makes me feel like the evil guy. However, I am aware that I cannot continue to allow them to abuse me in this manner. They refused to listen to me when I tried to explain how their actions were impacting me. My mother used classic emotional manipulation when she said things like, "You're choosing your husband over your own family. And you'll regret this when we're gone." I don't even believe they're interested in hearing my side of the story at this time. It seems as though they are merely trying to regain control over me because they are angry that I have deviated from their authority and are making every effort to entice me back. To be honest, I don't know what to do. A part of me feels that I should just stop talking to them altogether, change my phone number, remove them from social media, and stop communicating altogether. I'll regret it though, according to this persistent voice at the back of my head. That one day I'll regret how I handled things, or that perhaps, just possibly, they'll change their ways and see how poisonous their actions have been. Let's face it though, how likely is that to actually occur? They won't alter based on what I've observed thus far. If anything, they appear to be stepping up their efforts, claiming that I have betrayed them by defending myself. I can't continue to live this way, always being cautious and anticipating the next round of messages filled with guilt. I need some guidance, Reddit. What can I do to make this stop at last? Has anyone else experienced the same thing with family members that would not quit bothering them? How did you respond to it? Is avoiding touch the ideal course of action in this situation, or is there a medium ground that I haven't considered yet? They just won't go away, even though I feel like I've tried everything. My family seems intent on keeping me stuck in this cycle of duty and guilt, even though I want to go on with my life and concentrate on my marriage. I would appreciate any guidance. First update. Hello everyone. I thought I'd give you some further history on my family dynamic because many of you have been inquiring about my childhood. To be honest, there isn't a particularly noteworthy incident or time that made me understand my family wasn't supporting me. The fact that I was growing up in a home where I didn't feel understood or supported emotionally came to me more gradually. It's difficult to explain without coming across as ungrateful because, in theory, my parents fulfilled their obligations. I had clothes and food, attended school, and occasionally had family holidays. However, I never experienced genuine affection or value. My parents were always far more concerned about my older sister, Rose, when I was growing up. Not in the conventional sense of older sibling gets more responsibility. It seemed to them that I was the one who caused difficulty, the one they had to put up with, and Rose was innocent. When I tried to show them something I was enthusiastic about or bring home good marks, they would give me a half-hearted, "That's nice, Lexi," before going on to whatever Rose needed. I was only there, but she was always the focus of their attention. As a child, it's difficult to describe how alienating it is to be ignored and treated as though you're invisible. And that happened more than once. Throughout my early years, that pattern kept coming up. I believe I was 16 years old when I got into a heated argument with some of my school pals. At the time, it felt like the end of the world, one of those things that happens to teenagers. I cried when I got home, looking for some consolation or even some guidance. While a, "hey, it'll be okay" moment would have been nice, I'm not claiming I was expecting a full-on therapy session. Rather, my dad stated, quite literally, "You probably brought it on yourself. You should learn to pick better friends." When I told my parents about it, just blame, no embrace, no support. In the meantime, they would stop everything to assist Rose in resolving any problems she might have brought home. In addition, let's take a moment to discuss Rose. She wasn't exactly the epitome of an older sister who was helpful. In actuality, she essentially made it her mission to ruin my life whenever she could. She had a small group of pals who were all as conceited as she was, and they found it amusing to harass me. They would do things like hide my belongings, tease me about my attire, or even prank phone the house and say horrible things about me while posing as classmates. It was the sort of thing that, although it seems ridiculous now, seriously damaged my self-esteem when I was younger. What's the worst? My parents were aware of it. "She's just teasing you, Lexi. It's normal sibling stuff," people would respond when I explained what Rose was doing. But I never thought it was usual. When I was around 13, there was one really awful occurrence. I was persuaded to play a game of makeover with Rose and her friends. I should have known better, but I went along with it because I was so anxious for my sister's approval or attention. I looked like a clown when they applied makeup to my face in the most absurd way imaginable. Then, without my knowledge, they snapped photos and distributed them to classmates. Everyone laughed at me the following day. No reprimand for Rose, no pity for me, just the same old thing with an attitude. When I came home crying, my parents just responded, "It's just a joke, don't be so sensitive." In retrospect, I saw that these served as the foundation for my current relationship, or lack thereof, with my family. I worked for years to gain their acceptance and convince them that I was deserving of their love and care. However, it never succeeded. They didn't care about me or what I was going through since they were too preoccupied with Rose and her issues. To be honest, I believe that's the reason I've grown into the person I am now. Someone who has learned to be self-reliant and to defend myself when necessary. Because of this, I had previously felt disappointed by my family when the wedding situation arose. It was only the decisive moment. I had been the afterthought, the second choice, for years. It felt like the last straw when they requested that I postpone my wedding for Rose's sake. They seemed to have learnt nothing from the several instances in which they prioritized her above me. They wanted me to continue playing the part I had always played, which was the one who put the family's togetherness ahead of her happiness. However, I was no longer able to accomplish it. To be honest, it feels like a big relief that I finally made the decision to choose myself. That's the main idea of my early years, then. There was a great deal of emotional neglect and favoritism that left its impact, but nothing particularly dramatic. I've taken a while to come to terms with the fact that I can prioritize my needs and that I don't have to put up with toxic behavior just because someone is family. Now that I have Joshua, we are creating our own small family where I feel respected, loved, and supported. Things I didn't really experience as a child. Thank you for reading, and thank you to everyone who has contacted me with good comments and suggestions. It has a lot of meaning. I'm coming to see that, even with family, it's acceptable to establish limits. Even if it's difficult, I know I'm acting in my own best interests. Second update. Hello everyone, a lot has happened since my last post, so I wanted to offer you all some updates. Unsurprisingly, my folks discovered a new method to irritate me around a week after Joshua and I returned from our honeymoon. I received a message from them requesting that I come pick up my childhood belongings on Sunday since they wanted them out of their home. I was pretty well over it by then, but the message was sudden and cold. I assumed I would simply go get my belongings and be done with it. I tried not to make a big deal out of it, so I simply said, "Okay," in response. However, what I witnessed when I drove there with Joshua for support was beyond absurd. My entire belongings were already on the grass, stacked like a garage sale that nobody was interested in purchasing. And not simply tucked away either. Everything appeared to have been thrown out carelessly, as though it had been left there for hours or perhaps days. Some of my old books were wet from being in the morning dew, and several of my old clothes and toys looked like they had been on the grass for a long time. Things I genuinely cared about, like emotional treasures and old photo albums, had some water stains on them. My belongings were merely collateral damage, as if they were eager to get rid of me. I was enraged. Who, after all, does that? It was about the obvious contempt, not even about the items. Even though I was furious, I knew they were waiting for me to lose it, to scream, to cry, or to demand answers. It was as if they were sending a message that said, "We're done with you." From the window, I could almost see my mother waiting for me to respond. And to be honest, I wasn't going to satisfy them. I so maintained my composure rather than losing it. With composure, I turned to Joshua and requested him to assist me in packing the truck. We didn't knock on the door, talk to my parents, or ask for an explanation. Silently, we simply loaded the truck. Joshua helped me finish it without saying anything, but I believe he could tell I was holding back a lot. It was strange, though, since I became aware of something while we were packing everything up. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't devastated or heartbroken. All I felt was relief. To completely end the chapter of my connection with my parents, this was the last thing I needed. Strangely enough, it felt significant when they threw out my belongings in that manner. It seemed as though they were at last making it clear to me that I was no longer wanted in their lives. I no longer felt upset, but rather liberated from the guilt trips, the emotional games, and the continual pressure to fit in with a family that never truly made room for me. To be honest, I was more than willing to let it go since it felt like they were cutting the last tie. Third update. Hi everyone. Even though it's been a few months, I had to tell you all about something crazy that happened. So, do you recall Rose, my sister? The same sister that couldn't make it to my wedding because she was too depressed and grieved after her divorce. Yes, she is getting married the next week. I'm not making this up, I promise. In fewer than 7 days, the lady who said it took her at least 2 years to move on and find a new man will walk down the aisle. The irony is excessive. Do you know how I learned about it? It came from one of our cousins, not from her or my parents, who haven't spoken to me since the wedding fiasco. She forwarded me a screen grab of their social media engagement announcement. I was at home taking care of business when all of a sudden there was Rose, looking cheerful and in love, flashing her ring to her new fiancé as if the drama of the previous year had never occurred. I had to chuckle. I couldn't even be mad. At this point, it's really funny. Even stranger is the fact that neither Rose nor my parents have mentioned the situation at all. Nothing. Entitled Mom tries to force me to sell my property for her daughter's college and escalates when I refuse. I possess $34 million worth of real estate in our hometown, including a number of homes. Years of arduous labor, prudent financial decisions, and self-sacrificing actions have led to this. For background, I'm from a modest family. Both of my parents worked in blue-collar jobs and put in a lot of effort to give my siblings and I a decent upbringing. Although it was out of their price range, they had always hoped to own their own home. Their upbringing stoked my desire and strengthened my resolve to improve my family's quality of living. My wife and I were in college when we first met. Raised by a single mother who worked several jobs to make ends meet, my wife's family had similar experiences. She became aware of the importance of ingenuity and financial caution. Both of us aspired to overcome financial difficulties and provide a secure future for our kids. Over the years, my wife and I have been buying and flipping residences nonstop. We gradually accumulated a number of properties by carefully investing and saving every cent. Every property stood for years of toil, innumerable sacrifices, and a common goal between us. I am now the father of a son and a girl, 2 amazing children. In addition to being a source of revenue, our properties serve as a testament to our commitment to providing for our kids' futures. I had no idea that an entitled woman named Emily, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, who has been one of my tenants for a few years, would soon cause my life to take an unexpected turn. She lives in a cozy 3-bedroom home that I bought years ago, before I married my wife, after careful saving. Her daughter's high school is adjacent to the property, which is situated in a desirable area of the city. After their daughter was born, Emily's husband abruptly left her, leaving her a single mother. I gave her subsidized rent to allow her to move in after learning about her situation. I wanted her and her daughter to be able to afford to live there, even though I knew I would lose out financially. The rent has stayed the same over the years, and I have never raised it. Emily had consistently paid her rent on time, making her a dependable tenant. Our relationship as landlord and tenant became informal, and we occasionally stayed in touch when she needed my assistance around the property. Her daughter was a senior in high school and getting ready to submit a college application. Emily told me 3 months ago that her daughter was admitted to a renowned out-of-state university, which is an incredible accomplishment for any high school graduate. Unfortunately, her scholarship didn't even cover 10% of her tuition at this incredibly costly university. I was concerned about how they would handle the financial challenges of higher education because I was aware of them. Emily asked to meet me one day. Without much hesitation, I accepted, assuming it had something to do with the necessary house renovations. As we sat down in the house's living room, she began by expressing her gratitude for my generosity in providing her with a large portion of the rent. She went on to tell me how much she wanted Lily, her daughter, to go to the university of her dreams. But after calculating the costs, which included accommodation, tuition, and other charges, she found that it was too much for her to manage by herself. Even after applying for financial aid, researching scholarships, and taking a part-time job in addition to her full-time employment, it was still insufficient. Perhaps she was going to ask if she could postpone paying the rent for the month, which would have made sense, so I shook my head firmly in understanding. Rather, I was flabbergasted by Emily's astounding desire for me. She requested that I sell the house where she was residing. As she went on to explain that the property I owned and had rented out to her would bring in a healthy profit, enabling her to pay for her daughter's college education, I gave her a questioning glance. "Are you serious?" With a mixture of surprise and incredulity, I replied. "You want me to sell my property to pay for your daughter's college tuition?" Emily argued that it was her one chance to ensure her daughter's future, and her eyes begged me to do so. She said she was sure the entire property could pay for her daughter's college expenses because she had already had it evaluated. Since I couldn't possibly sell my house to pay for her daughter's tuition at a prestigious university, I asked her if she had gone insane. I informed her that I had sentimental attachment to this house and that I would not be selling it for nothing. Once more, Emily persisted, claiming that I could lend her the money and that her daughter would reimburse me after graduating. I knew how important a college education was, yet I refused to give in to her ridiculous demands. It was evident from listening to her entreaties that she was committed to finding a method to support her daughter's aspirations, even if it required proposing an absurd idea to an unfamiliar person. I calmly told Emily that I couldn't just give up the property because it was a big portion of my income. I should not be responsible for her daughter's tuition. I advised her to look into more cheap possibilities or ask family members for assistance if she was unable to pay for her daughter's tuition at the institution. Emily persisted in pressing the matter in spite of my attempts to persuade her to see the obvious, claiming that I was the only person who could assist and that selling my property and giving her the money wasn't a huge concern. I asked Emily not to come to me about this ever again, and when I realized it was not working, I left the property. I asked her to consider how ridiculous her request sounded and come up with an alternative. I had hoped that she would ultimately see her error, but Emily persisted throughout the following few weeks. The situation grew more intolerable as Emily's daughter was getting closer to starting college. Emily persuaded me daily to sell my property as quickly as possible, even though I denied it. She even protested by ceasing to pay her rent. As Emily persisted in her conviction that my property would solve her financial problems, our formerly cordial relationship deteriorated and our tension increased. She believed that my refusal endangered her daughter's future and was self-serving. However, because she was refusing to pay her rent, I was losing money. We had an unbreakable pact, so I told her that if she didn't comply, I would take the case to court. It was becoming more and more obvious that her demands were endless. When Emily began bringing other people into our argument, it was a tipping point. She spoke to her neighbors and friends, accusing me of being a callous landlord who would not assist a young girl in achieving her goals. She emphasized her position as a struggling single mother and informed them that although I was quite affluent, I would not lend her the money. Those she confided in sympathized with her story. Emily used social media to further her cause, posting on Facebook that she blamed me for her daughter's failure to go to college. Rumors soon began to spread throughout our area. People understood her predicament and believed that I could help but was purposefully refusing to. I couldn't help but feel alienated in my own neighborhood. At last, my wife made the decision to contact Emily in order to resolve the growing dispute. She thought that open communication would be a way to resolve the growing tension in the neighborhood, but Emily wasn't in the mood for a quiet conversation. She went on a rant right away, claiming that the only way she could ensure her daughter's future was for me, the landlord, to sell the house. My wife made sincere attempts to persuade Emily, but her conviction remained unwavering. She accused us of being self-centered and claimed that we had the money to pay for her daughter's college tuition. Emily persisted in pressuring my wife to comply with her requests, and the talk went on in a monotonous loop. Her message had a visible effect on the neighborhood and the local community, portraying me as a wealthy and callous landlord who would not assist a young girl in realizing her aspirations. We were viewed with suspicion by those neighbors who had previously been friends with us. They started to think that, although I was consciously refusing to do so out of selfishness, I did have the capacity to lessen her daughter's financial problems. Others who understood my background, my diligence, and the truth of my circumstances agreed with me and were equally horrified by Emily's bold request that I pay for it. They served as a reminder to me that I had to safeguard my assets and uphold the legacy I had worked so hard to establish. Every day, the community grew further polarized, with some people feeling sorry for Emily. I remained firm in my resolve to defend my property in the face of increasing pressure. I had worked hard and made sacrifices for years to earn it, and I wasn't about to give it up easily. Emily, meantime, kept stoking the fire by accusing me of being uncaring and taking advantage of her by letting her live for free. Her statements on social media grew more outspoken as she talked about her daughter's perseverance and the innumerable sacrifices she had made in order to become ready for college. Consequently, the argument progressed from a private dispute to a public discussion. My family was beginning to feel the effects of the accusations. As a result of their peers repeating the untrue things they had seen on social media about me, my children started to be bullied at school. Seeing how distressed they were by this circumstance was awful. I made the decision that it was time to act at that point. Since Emily was affecting my children, I had remained silent, believing that she would ultimately cease, but it was time to correct the record and stand up for my morals. I contacted a lawyer that focused on tenant-landlord disputes and property disputes. In order to stop Emily's defamatory efforts and preserve my reputation in the community, we quickly wrote a cease and desist letter. According to my lawyer, the cease and desist letter was the beginning of our legal struggle, and we would go all the way to court if Emily didn't change her mind. Emily was obviously shocked to receive the letter. She tried calling me on the phone, but I declined to take her calls. Then, before things got out of hand, she texted me to say she wanted to chat and make amends. She said we could have a conversation and that it was all a big misunderstanding. I responded by saying I was going to sue her. She was going to regret ever trying to play me, so I encouraged her to enjoy it and brace herself. Emily has been adamant that I cover her daughter's tuition, damaging our family's reputation in the town and online, so I know this will be a difficult battle. My attorney is already getting ready for the case by detailing all of the unfounded charges and the damage she has done to us over the past few months. Some of my family members advised me to give her a chance to resolve the matter as she is a single mother attempting to act in her child's best interests after learning that I was bringing her to court. So, Reddit, am I the jerk for taking the entitled mother to court rather than selling my home to cover her daughter's college expenses? Update. Emily sent a letter of her own, containing more defamatory remarks and threats, in response to our legal action. Despite being aware of her financial circumstances, she has accused me of charging exorbitant rent, which she claims prevented her from saving money for her daughter's schooling. Her willingness to deceive and go to such lengths to achieve her goals is astounding. I've already given her subsidized rent, so it's annoying to see her play the victim when her claims are unfounded. She is obviously attempting to take advantage of the situation, and I will not allow it to occur. Emily's determination to fight to the end is apparent. Although my attorney, Matthew, has reassured me that we have a solid case because her charges are unfounded, he has advised me to be ready for a drawn-out and taxing court process. I can't help but consider how rapidly things have gotten out of hand. I had no desire to find myself in a courtroom, particularly with someone who had previously occupied my land. However, there are instances when you must defend what is rightly yours and stand your ground. Even if Emily may have good reasons, I can't let her force me to sell my property. The future of my family is on the line, and I'm committed to seeing this through to the end, no matter how difficult it gets. Update 2. The legal process has formally started since my last report. It had been agonizingly painful to wait for the court date. Tension permeated the courtroom as both sides presented their cases and supporting documentation. Emily presented herself as a struggling mother who is committed to securing her daughter's future, accompanied by her lawyer. In a detailed account of financial difficulties, her lawyer emphasized how my property had been the last straw for her daughter's aspirations to enroll in a prominent out-of-state university. Emily's emotional statement was filled with emotions as she talked about the sacrifices she had made as a single mother, including the long hours she put in at work and her unshakable dedication to her daughter's achievement. She portrayed herself as a mother who had done everything she could, talking about her tenacious job hunts and multiple applications for financial aid and scholarships. Emily's lawyer persisted in portraying me as a rich, callous landlord who put money over a young girl's aspirations during the proceedings. They suggested that I had been aware of Emily's financial difficulties but had nevertheless taken advantage of her predicament by charging her exorbitant rent. Emily presented a family friend as a witness, claiming to have overheard a conversation between Emily and me in which I supposedly offered to sell the property to pay for her daughter's college education. This was the most shocking turn of events. When this flagrant untruth was told in court, I sat there in shock. Matthew, my lawyer, vigorously disputed this allegation, claiming that no such discussion had ever occurred. He made the deliberate decision to refute the witness's account. The family acquaintance who testified on the purported conversation was first subjected to cross-examination by Matthew. In order to determine the witness's memory's credibility, he asked a number of specific questions. In an attempt to uncover discrepancies or holes in their memory, Matthew inquired about the time, date, and place of the alleged conversation. The family friend found it difficult to respond with consistent information and was unable to provide any hard proof to back up their claim, such as emails or texts. Under examination, their testimony grew more and more dubious. Matthew provided evidence that directly refuted Emily's account, severely undermining the case's credibility. He presented documents of emails and texts that were sent back and forth between Emily and myself at the time the said agreement was allegedly made. These texts made it quite evident that she had never brought up the idea of selling the land to pay for her daughter's schooling. Rather, they proved that it was Emily who was always putting pressure on me to sell the house. Furthermore, according to testimony from a neighbor who shared a residence with Emily, Emily had been paying lower rent than any other renter in the neighborhood. To support this claim, my attorney retrieved receipts from other local tenants. Matthew continued by arguing that the neighbor's evidence and the lack of any written or electronic correspondence about the purported pledge Emily made called into question the veracity of the family friend's story. This testimony was inadmissible as hard proof. We then concentrated on demonstrating that Emily had purposefully gone to considerable measures to damage my reputation on social media, which had led to my kids being bullied. In a detailed account of Emily's communications and posts on social media, my lawyer claimed that I was a callous and uncaring landlord who did not encourage her daughter's aspirations. In order to win the community's sympathy and support, these posts were rife with emotional appeals and downright lies. We pointed out that these posts were purposefully written to present her as a struggling mother who was doing everything in her ability to ensure her daughter's future, but in actuality, she was using emotional blackmail to pressure me into selling my house. Matthew then displayed screen grabs of direct messages and comments left by people who had interacted with Emily's posts on social media. Because of the misleading information Emily provided, some of these local residents had developed a bad view of me. These remarks ranged from expressing empathy for her predicament to flatly accusing me of being a callous landlord taking advantage of her circumstances. Along with the social media data, we also included witness statements from my kids, who said that Emily's posts caused them to be bullied at school. They described how classmates harassed and name-called them after echoing the untrue statements they had heard about their father on social media. My lawyer contended that the bullying my kids experienced was directly related to Emily's unfounded charges on social media. Emily's purposefully false story had a negative impact on my family's welfare in addition to harming my reputation. This evidence-based presentation clearly illustrated how Emily's social media behavior affected my kids in real life. I continue to believe that justice will be done as the legal process progresses. The truth has been revealed and the untrue allegations against me have been exposed by the evidence that has been given thus far. In my opinion, the court will recognize the manipulation and provide a just resolution in this matter. Third update. We prevailed. The legal proceedings have made the past month a taxing one. Unexpected turns and twists have made it feel like a roller coaster ride. It became more and more obvious that Emily's allegations were unfounded as my attorney began to provide testimony and supporting documentation. When she introduced a family acquaintance who gave a bogus statement about a pledge I had never made, her attempt to control the event failed. The legitimacy of the witnesses' assertions is seriously called into question due to the absence of hard proof and discrepancies in their testimony. The court declared the result and decided in my favor after carefully reviewing all of the testimony and supporting documentation. I was quite relieved by this and thankful that the judge saw through all of the unfounded allegations. After being convicted of defamation, Emily was mandated to compensate me for the damage she had done to my reputation. This involved paying the past month's rent as well as any further penalties. Additionally, a restraining order was granted to stop Emily from speaking negatively about my family or me in the future. My conduct and my right to defend my property were upheld by this decision. I saw Emily seated next to her attorney, looking defeated, as the court case came to an end. As I looked at her daughter Lily, I couldn't help but think that her mother's conceit had ruined her hopes. Justice has been done, and this nightmare is now over. Everyone learned the value of standing up for themselves and not allowing the bold demands of others to undermine our moral convictions. Now that my home and our means of subsistence are safe, I can proceed with a fresh sense of confidence. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has helped me along the way thus far. My family and I endured tremendous emotional strain and hardship, but in the end, the truth won out. Fourth update. 6 months have passed since my previous update. Emily has been successfully silenced by the restraining order since my court victory, and the damages she was required to pay for defamation offered some measure of comfort for the damage done to my reputation. I served Emily with an eviction notice, and she and her kid were forced to vacate. Even if their situation is still difficult, I realized I was no longer in charge of them. Although I felt a little sorry for her daughter's missed educational prospects, the truth was that Emily's bold request had placed their family in a challenging position. Everyone soon saw the full depth of Emily's lies after the court ordered her to remove her defamatory social media posts. When her daughter Lily unexpectedly contacted me to apologize, that was the last I heard from them. I had watched Lily grow up and she had always been a wonderful child, but I stopped communicating with them when her mother began making unfounded accusations against me. She wanted to contact me after her mother publicly lost the case, which startled me. She expressed sincere regret in her message for her mother's actions and the resulting difficulties for her family. She acknowledged that her mother's actions had harmed both of our families and thanked us for our understanding and patience during the process. Lily also mentioned that they had moved to a more reasonably priced neighborhood and that she had made the decision to continue her study at a nearby college. She told me she had begged her mother to back off in a conversation she had with her following the conclusion of the judicial proceedings. "I'm determined to secure my own future without making any bold demands," Lily said. Because of the bogus claims made by her entitled mother, I felt sorry for her at such a young age. I told her that it was great that she was taking charge of her own life and that everyone deserves a second chance. I told her that the past was behind us and wished her well in her studies. Our lives have adapted to a new normal since Emily and her daughter left my property. The burden of the unfounded allegations and the harassment our kids endured has been removed. We intervened by getting in touch with our kids' school and addressing the bullying they experienced. At last, our family may now proceed in harmony. I found out my parents funded my sister's secret family for years while ignoring my son's medical bills, leading to his death. I never thought I'd write this, but my family's tragedy has utterly ruined me. It tells the story of how my sister and dad betrayed me, causing my 2-year-old son to die. There were 4 of us growing up: my mom, 58F, a math teacher at the local high school; my older sister Sarah, 35F; my dad, 60M, a senior insurance agent at a large firm; and myself, 28F. We appeared to have a lovely life and lived in a nice area, but there was always one major issue: my parents' intense preference for Sarah. Favoritism began at a very young age. Sarah had ballet classes, painting lessons, and piano lessons throughout elementary school. My parents told me we couldn't afford 2 kids participating in extracurricular activities when I begged to join any. While I wore her hand-me-downs, Sarah purchased new clothes from the mall. I used her old phones till they broke, but she always acquired the newest iPhone models. Sarah requested braces at the age of 13. Without hesitation, my parents paid $6,000. When my dentist informed me a year later that I also required braces, they indicated we would have to wait due to financial difficulties. I still have crooked teeth at the age of 28, and I never got them. Sarah received a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday. They advised me to work and save money for a car of my own when I became 16. I only bought a used Toyota that broke down after 6 months of working at McDonald's after school for 2 years. All the way through high school, the trend persisted. While I had to work part-time jobs to pay for necessities like clothes and school supplies, Sarah was free to concentrate only on her education and enjoyable hobbies. When it came time for college, I had to start at a community institution, but Sarah attended a pricey elite university. My parents covered all of her costs, including a condo close to her college and a semester abroad in Paris. To pay for my textbooks and bus fare to school, I worked 2 jobs, one as a campus library assistant and another at a coffee shop. After transferring to State University, I was in my 3rd year when I met my spouse, James, 30M. He worked part-time at the college IT department while pursuing an engineering degree. I felt like someone actually cared about me for the first time when we started dating. James was also from a middle-class family, but when he was in high school, his parents died in a car accident. He worked hard to pay for college while living with his aunt during high school. Before we were married, we dated for 3 years. We were saving money for a down payment on a house, so I planned a little courthouse wedding, but James felt that since it was a once-in-a-lifetime event, I should have a genuine wedding. We organized a little ceremony for perhaps 50 people in a nearby church. Sarah said she had an important work meeting, therefore she didn't arrive. Sarah had arranged a family vacation for that weekend, so my parents nearly skipped it as well. When my mom's sister confronted them about it, they abruptly changed their plans. Tommy was born to me 2 years after we were married. With terrible morning sickness and gestational diabetes, the pregnancy was difficult from the beginning. The worst news arrived in 32 weeks. Doctors discovered Tommy's significant cardiac issue during a routine scan. They stated that beginning immediately after delivery, he would require multiple procedures over the course of his life. Despite our grief, James and I were committed to doing everything in our power to ensure our son's health. The day following Tommy's birth, his first surgery was performed. Although the majority of the $150,000 was covered by insurance, we still had to pay $30,000 out of pocket. We took out loans and spent all of our savings. James began putting in extra hours at his engineering job and taking on weekend freelancing work. I was caring for Tommy while working from home as a virtual assistant. Tommy had to have another operation 6 months later. I turned to my parents for assistance because we were already having trouble paying for the initial operation. They had just returned from a Mediterranean cruise with Sarah that lasted 2 weeks. I stated to them that we had previously sold our car and made every feasible cut while displaying all of our medical expenses. They claimed they couldn't help since they were facing financial difficulties. I didn't know the truth, so I trusted them. We barely made it for the following year and a half. James put in 80-hour weeks until he became so worn out that he passed out on the job. I started taking on additional virtual assistant jobs and began using eBay to sell items from our home. During this period, my parents took 3 family holidays with Sarah and gave her a brand new Mercedes for her birthday. They said that because Sarah worked well in finance, she was responsible for paying for all of these. This turned out to be a lie. Tommy deteriorated significantly last month. His heart suddenly stopped working correctly, necessitating emergency surgery that would have cost $50,000. We didn't have a method to get that much money fast, and our insurance had hit its annual cap. I begged my parents for assistance once more, this time down on my knees. I offered to sign a formal agreement promising to give them our house, double the money they owed, and anything else they desired. They declined once more, stating that recent medical expenses had depleted their savings. We were unable to pay for Tommy's surgery, therefore he passed away 2 days later. He had just turned 2. My parents claimed they had to assist Sarah with an urgent matter, so they barely stayed for 30 minutes at his burial. While tidying Tommy's room yesterday, I discovered my dad's old phone beneath the bed. He must have lost it when he was there 3 weeks prior. I checked the phone, which was still functional, and discovered hundreds of texts between Sarah and my parents. I learned the truth in this way, and it ruined what remained of our family. Sarah had been leading an entirely different life, one that none of us were aware of, according to the texts. She had 3 children in Florida with a man named Mark after 7 years of marriage. All this time my parents had been providing for them financially by giving them large sums of money each month. I read through all of the messages for 5 hours. My parents send Sarah $5,000 a month to cover everyday expenditures. Each of her 3 children attended a private school that they paid $2,000 a month for. They provided coverage for their family's trips to Hawaii and Europe. They spent $400,000 last year on a Hamptons vacation home. My parents even covered the cost of their weekly lawn care and house cleaning service. The most recent correspondence concerned Sarah's desire to purchase a beach property. My parents sent Sarah $75,000 for the down payment 5 days before telling me they couldn't save Tommy. Additionally, there were notes about the 3 new iPads and game consoles they had already purchased for Sarah's children as Christmas gifts. The gifts that each child received exceeded the expense of Tommy's surgery. Our monthly family dinner was held today. Every month on the last Sunday, my aunts, uncles, and cousins all gather at my parents' house. In an effort to keep the family close, my mom established this custom 5 years ago. Typically, about 25 individuals show there. Sarah consistently excused herself from these dinners by citing work obligations. I now know that she was in Florida with her clandestine family. I went to supper with my dad's phone. I used screen mirroring to link the phone to the TV after everyone had finished eating and gone to the living room for coffee. I displayed the financial transfers, the communications, and the pictures of Sarah's covert existence to everyone. I told her how my parents refused to help save their dying grandchild, but had paid her $75,000 for a beach house. My mother began to cry and reached out to give me a hug. I stepped back from her. Sitting there, my dad gazed at the floor. With a sneer on her lips, Sarah, who had actually attended this meal for the first time in years, simply sat on the couch. She informed everyone that I was being dramatic as usual and that they should realize that she had 3 children to support and so needed the money more. I questioned her about if Tommy's life was more important than her children. I was crazy for drawing similarities, she said. My mother made an effort to clarify that Sarah was their top priority as she had always required more assistance and had been more emotionally sensitive. My dad went on to say that they assisted Sarah because she lacked my strength and independence. My Aunt Susan questioned them about how they could afford to spend thousands on Sarah's beach mansion and still allow their grandson to die. My parents couldn't respond. Other family members began inquiring about the several occasions my parents and Sarah had taken out loans from them under the pretext of crises. Sarah became irate and said that I had no right to reveal her personal information. She claimed that if anyone learned about this circumstance, her children would suffer from trauma. I informed them that they were no longer my family. In order to purchase a beach property for Sarah, they witnessed the death of my son. I told them that their decisions had killed them, just as Tommy had died. Sarah began to yell that I was jealously attempting to ruin her life. She claimed that because our parents loved her more, I had always envied her. I banned their numbers after leaving their home. I was followed by several family members who promised to help me if I decided to file a lawsuit. Sarah and my parents have been blocked on social media by the majority of my cousins, but some relatives are emailing me to say that I went too far by disclosing Sarah's secret in public. They believe I ought to have dealt with it in private. James agrees with my decision to stop communicating with them, but he believes there was a better way for me to reveal the truth. I don't care anymore, but he is concerned about how this may impact our ties with our extended family. Instead of protecting their grandson's life, my parents decided to fund Sarah's opulent lifestyle, which is why my son is dead. Update. Since I revealed Sarah and my parents during the family dinner, a lot has transpired. Over the years, more relatives have come forward with tales of my parents' deceit and Sarah's manipulation. I'm more and more aware of their deceit with every new story. 3 days after the dinner, I received a call from my Aunt Linda. She sobbed as she informed me about last year's $30,000 loan to Sarah. According to Sarah, her oldest kid developed appendicitis and required emergency surgery. Because she didn't want another child to go through what Tommy had gone through, Linda spent all of her retirement funds to assist. Later, Linda learned that there was no operation. Sarah installed a pool and updated the kitchen at her beach house using the funds. The story of my cousin Emily was even worse. She visited my home last week and told me something that made me feel nauseous. Emily was engaged to Mark, Sarah's husband, 8 years prior. After graduating from college, Emily and Mark became engaged. They sent out invites, organized a lavish wedding, and Emily even purchased her own gown. Mark went missing 2 weeks prior to the wedding. He wrote a note stating that he wasn't prepared to get married. After having a breakdown, Emily required 2 years of therapy. She is aware of the reality now. While Mark was engaged to Emily, Sarah had been seeing him in secret for months. He was persuaded by Sarah to abandon Emily and follow her to Florida. My parents were well informed. They assisted Sarah and Mark in choosing their Florida home. 3 months after Mark's separation from Emily, they even went to their small, secret wedding. They were aware of Sarah's actions and watched Emily battle sadness the entire time. 2 more stories were then released. I was discovered on Facebook by Tom, Sarah's first husband. Sarah's previous marriage to Mark was unknown to me. Soon after graduating from college, Tom and Sarah were married and had a daughter. Sarah emptied their bank accounts and vanished when their daughter was 2 years old. She seized all of Tom's inheritance from his grandmother, along with $40,000 from their savings. Sarah informed everyone that she had to leave because Tom was abusive. Sarah's falsehoods cost Tom his job, his home, and almost their daughter's custody. In order to obtain child support for their now 15-year-old daughter, he had been looking for Sarah for years. Sarah's whereabouts were always known to my parents. They assisted Sarah in creating fictitious documents demonstrating that she was in danger from Tom and paid attorneys to contest Tom's custody claims. Everything became worse when James discovered something in our safe deposit box last week. Like they said they did for all their grandchildren, my parents set up a trust fund for Tommy when he was born. They committed to investing $1,000 each month until he became 18. There should have been more than $100,000 in the trust. We discovered records that demonstrated they had been moving all of the funds to Sarah's children's accounts. James continued searching through our documents and discovered further proof of their dishonesty. My parents were retired and on fixed incomes, so each time we filed for financial aid for Tommy's medical bills, they wrote letters to the hospital stating that they were unable to assist. However, their bank records reveal that they were simultaneously sending Sarah sizable sums. I was contacted over LinkedIn by my dad's secretary. According to her, my dad had been assisting Sarah with corporate funds, classifying the transfers as business costs. In order to demonstrate that Sarah was a business consultant for his insurance company, he fabricated paperwork. According to the secretary, he had sent more than $200,000 in business funds to Sarah throughout the previous 3 years. According to my mom's best friend, who also works at the same school, my mom has been embezzling money from the school's fundraising accounts in order to give it to Sarah. She changed the records to hide it. Each year, the school generated funds for the medical emergencies of its students. This fund was overseen by my mother, who also had access to every account. Since I blocked Sarah, she has been attempting to reach me from several phone numbers. She occasionally threatens to sue me for violation of privacy and defamation. At other times, she calls in tears and says that Mark is questioning her about her history and she wants my assistance. She said in her voicemail yesterday that if I didn't stop anyone from looking into her finances, she would tell everyone that I had abused Tommy. Yesterday, my parents issued a letter via their attorney. They said that if I agreed not to sue them, they would create a new trust fund for my future children. To demonstrate their good faith, they promised to contribute $200,000 right away. They also wanted me to sign a non-disclosure agreement in the letter, which said that I would never speak about Sarah's life or how they helped to sustain her financially. A number of family members have severed all communication with Sarah and my parents. After learning of what transpired, my dad's golfing pals have ceased inviting him to their weekly events. The other members of my mom's book club, who were primarily the parents of her students, no longer wanted to get out with her, so she had to dissolve it. The most challenging aspect is that pictures of Sarah's family traveling to upscale locations while Tommy was ill kept turning up. The same week that we were pleading with my parents to contribute to Tommy's last surgery, someone discovered photos of Sarah's family at Disney World. The matching outfits Sarah's children are wearing in the pictures cost more than what we had to buy to save my son's life. Second update. Our attorney discovered something that clarifies a lot of my parents' actions, particularly their strong preference for Sarah. Sarah is not their biological daughter, as we found out. At the age of 2, she was adopted. They didn't tell anyone, not even Sarah. While our lawyer was looking into the missing trust fund funds, the adoption documents surfaced. Sarah was adopted by my parents following my mother's 4 miscarriages. Because they were concerned that it would impact Sarah's feeling of family, they chose to keep the adoption a secret. Not even our grandparents were informed. In order to avoid being questioned about the unexpected arrival of a 2-year-old, they relocated to a different city immediately following the adoption. The attorney also discovered proof that my parents had assisted Sarah in her scam throughout the years. My parents hired someone $155,000 to fabricate transcripts indicating Sarah graduated with honors after she left college after 2 years. They had a business associate of my dad write fictitious work references for her. Sarah never worked anyplace. All of the jobs she claimed to have had throughout the years were fictitious. In order to obtain credit cards and loans, my parents assisted her in fabricating an identity. They obtained phony papers by using my dad's contacts at the insurance firm. Sarah obtained moreover $300,000 in loans from various banks using this fictitious name. My dad's business provided the funds that my parents used to make the payments. Sarah lost all control when our lawyer informed her about the adoption. She posted all of this on Facebook. She disclosed how my parents assisted her in stealing Emily's fiancé, hiding from her first husband, and concealing her credit card theft. She even acknowledged that she had made false claims regarding the abuse of her first spouse. Sarah shared images of text exchanges that demonstrated how my parents assisted her in fabricating a medical emergency so she could get family members to lend her money. She had a routine. She would choose a financially secure relative, fabricate a narrative about one of her children requiring medical care and have my parents verify her account. In this way, they conned at least 7 different relatives. At last, my parents sobbed and told our lawyer everything. They have supported Sarah and her family with over $500,000 over the last 10 years. They borrowed funds from their retirement accounts, took out second and third mortgages on their home, and my dad even embezzled from the client accounts of his business. I was even more incensed by their response when the lawyer questioned them about why they chose to let Tommy die rather than assist us. They said that if they stopped providing Sarah money, they would be cut off from their grandkids. According to my dad, if the kids ever stopped supporting Sarah's lifestyle, she had threatened to vanish with them. My mother acknowledged that she was aware of Sarah's scheme to take Mark away from Emily. She claimed that Sarah had confided in her that she would stop at nothing to win Mark's affection. Rather than intervening, my mother assisted Sarah in setting up private sessions with Mark. Even the note that Mark left for Emily was written with her assistance. Our lawyer now works with Tom, Sarah's first husband. He has evidence that my parents assisted Sarah in fabricating accusations of domestic abuse against him. To fabricate medical records indicating injuries, they hired a physician. With the aid of these documents, Sarah was able to get restraining orders against Tom, which barred him from visiting his daughter for several years. When my dad's business learned about the stolen funds, an internal investigation was launched. He had been fabricating insurance policies and keeping the premiums, they found out. He used the funds to support Sarah and created policies for non-existent people. He was dismissed by the corporation and is facing criminal prosecution. Concerned about being linked to my dad's scam, a number of his business associates have severed their connections with him. After parents protested that their children were being taught by someone involved in fraud, my mother was forced to leave teaching early. Additionally, the school is looking into the disappearance of dollars from student activities funds. In order to cover their legal expenses, my parents had to sell their home. They could be charged with fraud, embezzlement, and aiding in the creation of fraudulent documents. For making fictitious police reports about her first husband, identity theft, and financial fraud, Sarah is under investigation. Update 3. Over the last 6 months, everything with my family has dramatically changed. In order to settle their legal debts, my parents had to sell their home and the majority of their belongings. They currently reside on the opposite side of town in a little one-bedroom apartment. My dad needs to repay $400,000 that he took from customer accounts after his company won their lawsuit against him. Unfortunately, no insurance firm will hire him, so he is now working as a night security guard. After Mark learned about Sarah's first marriage and all of her falsehoods, her life completely collapsed. Even more information about her past was discovered by the private investigator he hired. Prior to her first marriage, Sarah had another child from a previous relationship. She never mentioned this child to anyone and relinquished her parental rights. The fact that she had left 2 children behind before becoming his wife and father repulsed Mark. Mark obtained full custody of their 3 children after filing for divorce. The judge concurred that Sarah's past of deception and desertion made her an unfit mother. She is not even permitted to visit the kids unattended. Mark and the children returned to their hometown in Texas. He had to obtain a restraining order since Sarah kept creating fresh social media profiles to reach him. Tom, Sarah's first husband, won his appeal for retroactive child support. Sarah was ordered by the court to give him $150,000 plus interest for the years she was missing. They are seizing the meager fortune she received from our grandma last year since she's unemployed. Now 15, Tom's daughter won't talk to Sarah or my parents after finding out that they assisted in keeping her from her father. Because of the stolen fiancé event, my cousin Emily sued Sarah in civil court for mental anguish. Sarah and my parents planned the entire thing months in advance, according to old emails that Emily's lawyer discovered. Because Mark's family was wealthy, they specifically targeted him. Last month, the matter was resolved out of court, but as a condition of the deal, Sarah had to give Emily her beach house. James received an offer of employment in Colorado that had complete medical benefits and higher wages. To start over, we made the decision to relocate. We're keeping it quiet this time, but I'm 4 months pregnant. The only people who are aware of the pregnancy are my Aunt Linda and 2 cousins. We've made the decision to stop communicating with Sarah and my parents. Some family members are still attempting to persuade me to pardon my parents. They claim that my parents have learned their lesson and lost everything. I am constantly getting letters from Uncle Bob about how my parents miss us and cry during family get-togethers. However, I informed him that I don't care about their tears because their decisions caused my son to lose out on his entire life. Last week, Sarah was arrested for attempting to use her children's social security information to apply for new credit cards. She is being charged with identity theft. When she was in jail, she called me to seek assistance with bail money. I banned the phone number of the jail. The only positive outcome of this circumstance is the increased closeness of other family members. In Colorado, my Aunt Linda moved close to us to assist with the impending baby. My cousins have established a group chat where we encourage one another and communicate every day. Without Sarah and my parents, we are starting a new family. Every day I still miss Tommy. We talk about him a lot, and his photos are everywhere in our new home. However, I'm happy that my parents and Sarah's truth was revealed. At least they are no longer able to harm others with their falsehoods. Among all of this, the most difficult lesson I took away was that sometimes the people who ought to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the most. However, right now, my attention is on the future and creating a better life with the family members that genuinely care about us.